con una de las conferencias magistrales del día de hoy, en donde el señor Dennis Jones, quien durante 42 años trabajó para la seguridad de Estados Unidos. Sus últimos años fue escalando y escalando hasta llegar a ser el director nacional de transporte y seguridad de Estados Unidos. Él es el que se encarga de revisar los choques de aviones, de trenes, las explosiones, todo lo que tenga que ver con accidentes y con catástrofes en Estados Unidos. Él es un piloto, aviador, cambió las leyes de la aviación y es el responsable de hacer la aviación más segura a nivel mundial. Sin más introducción, no más que esa, quisiera brindarle un fuerte aplauso al señor Dennis Jones, que nos acompaña desde Washington, Estados Unidos, con esta presentación.
Yes, hello.
Hello.
Hello, Dennis. We can hear you and see you now.
Okay, very good. Have I been introduced or should I do that?
We've introduced you. But
okay.
you want to add a little bit more about yourself right now?
Oh, I sure will. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Dennis Jones, retired Managing Director of the National Transportation Safety Board,
Lo que es de seguridad de transporte,
where I spent 40 years of my career.
donde fueron, you said 14 or 40, I'm sorry.
I joined the agency as an intern, and
Fui como interno, empecé ahí en la
up
agencia,
to being the person responsible to running the day-to-day operation of the agency. During that time period,
durante ese periodo de tiempo,
worked at all the levels of the agency,
trabajé en
from
todos los niveles
technical
de la
to
agencia,
supervisory,
supervisión
managerial, and executive.
y ejecutivo.
And I spent much of my career as an air
Pasé
safety
la mayoría parte
investigator,
de mi carrera.
of which my function was to
Mi
investigate
función fue de
airplane
investigar
crashes that, as time went on, was all over the world.
cuando el
I
tiempo
believe
pasó por
near the end
todo
of
el
my
mundo.
career, someone did a look at my information, and I investigated about 1,500 accidents during that period of time.
Entonces, todo ese periodo de tiempo tuve como 15 accidentes. No lo escucho a él, entonces it's going to be hard because I can't hear him in here. I'm sorry,
Of course,
Dennis. I'm sorry.
Okay, Dennis, I can hear you a little bit better maybe than the translator. I'm going to do the translation for you. Okay? Yes. Oh, go ahead, Dennis. We're ready.
Okay, continue?
Yes, please.
Yes, and towards the latter part of my career, most of the investigation was major
Me
catastrophic
pasé por parte
accidents
de mi carrera en la investigación y de catástrofes a través de todo el mundo.
for about 20 years of
Como
my
por 20
investigation
años
career, I focused
de mi
on
periodo
investigating
investigacional,
accidents
investigando
in
accidentes
developing countries.
y en lo que es países mundiales.
And just a brief background on why the NTSB, National Transportation Safety Board, would be traveling around the world for accident investigation.
You're on. You can continue.
Dennis, I think what we're going to do is that we're just going to just speak straight, and then we'll do the translation. You just go straight and speak as you would naturally, because it's too cumbersome otherwise.
You can continue, Mr. Jones.
Dennis, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, we're gonna. I think what we're doing is we're gonna scrap the translation for now. It's too distracting, and so just go right ahead.
Okay. What you're viewing here in the slide is a typical crash site for the work that I did. This happens to be in the country of Nigeria. It's what's left of a Boeing 737 with 117 people on board. The airplane crashed straight down. Shortly after takeoff, it climbed up and then descended at a steep dive, and we estimated the impact was about 400 miles per hour. At the top of that crater, as we call it, that crater, you can see me. I'm the person that's bending over with the blue shirt on and white pants. That's me. So this is a typical scene of the work that I did. And incidentally, this is about 10 days after the accident. And you can see the site is still smoking. And to give you an idea of the kind of devastation, after 30 days of recovery work, victim recovery, they only found 100 pounds of remains. So that was a typical accident site and what I had to deal with during the course of my investigations.
Dennis, Dennis, do you want to just put the slide on full screen on the slideshow so we can see right now?
I do have it here. I have it on here. I'm looking at that. What are you seeing there?
We're seeing it as a screen within a screen.
Okay. Let me see what we got here.
So we're seeing the notes too. So if you want to change it to a full mode slide.
Okay, let me seems like I'm not able to do it from my side here. Let me try this again. I'll come out and go back in.
I think it's on your side. That's it. You did it. You did it, Dennis. Whatever you did, you did.
You did it. It's done.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay. Well, I'm still seeing something different on my side, but you guys can see the whole thing. That's good.
We're good, Dennis.
We're good.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Can you hear me? ¿Me pueden oír bien? Sí. Yes.
The challenge about working in many parts of the world was that the investigative cultures are very different wherever you may go. For example, here in this particular crash site, besides dealing with all the other kind of challenges at the crash scene, in countries like this, before the authorities arrive on the scene, quite often the local people are the first ones on the scene. And so a lot of looting takes place before the authorities even arrive. And in this particular case, looters actually took the black boxes. And I did one case some years ago, also in another country, where looters arrived on the scene and they were literally taking body parts from the crash site, which was the strangest thing I've ever seen. And you ask, why would someone steal body parts? And they said it was for witchcraft. So anyway, the investigations are done all around the world, and the reason why the U.S. government was on the scene is because under international protocols, whenever a U.S. manufactured aircraft is involved in an accident, the U.S. can participate in that investigation. So, for example, if a Boeing 737 or another U.S. product crashes in Russia, and I've been to Russia also, the NTSB, as representing the U.S. government, would participate in an accident. And this is why we participate in so many accidents around the world, because Boeing aircraft and other type of aircraft and also engines are also involved, are all over the world. So this results in us traveling to many, many locations. For me, it was approximately 65 countries, including in Central America and South America as well. Okay, can you still see my slides?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, I'm going to go to my next one. Are you seeing the full slide?
Yes, sir.
Okay, sounds good. I just want to talk a little bit about the investigative process, and I do want to say this too, is that
Sorry, Dennis, the slide.
what we try to do in our accident investigations is to try to determine the facts.
Dennis, sorry, the slide didn't change, so can you,
Okay. It's changing on my end. Let's see what's going on.
you might have to go out of full screen and go back to where it was, and now we're seeing the next slide.
Okay, I see what I have to do. I'm going to have to go out again each time in order to get to the next slide. But anyway, the purpose of an accident investigation is to develop the facts, conditions, and circumstances surrounding the accident. And as a result of that, we're able to determine probable causes. But the most important reason for doing our accident investigation is to make recommendations to prevent it from occurring again. That is the sole purpose of an accident investigation internationally, safety investigation, I should say. It's the sole purpose is to come up with corrective actions, what we call recommendations, remedial actions to prevent the accident from occurring again. That is the sole purpose of a safety investigation. Now, there are parallel investigations that take place, and they may be for criminal, judicial reasons, for administrative reasons. There may even be civil lawsuits that take place. But in the United States, the safety investigation takes precedent of all the other investigations. We use the term primacy. An accident investigation, the National Transportation Safety Board has primacy. And what that means is that all the evidence related to the accident, we have first access to, and our accident investigation will actually supersede any other investigation. The parallel investigations that take place. Incidentally, with the NTSB, the accident reports cannot be used in a court of law. That was the way we were set up by the U.S. Congress. The agency has been around since 1931. That's when the agency first came. And at that time, it was under the Department of Commerce. Department of Commerce was the, because of the post office was the first commercial transportation in the U.S. long before passenger transport. It was low school. And the NTSB was actually created under the post office during that period of time because the agency has evolved today, and it's an independent agency that reports directly to the U.S. Congress. What you can see here, let's talk a little bit about the investigative process. The first thing, just like this, put it very simple. And an accident is a sequence of events. I use dominoes here to simply show how the various chain of events take place, moving towards what is ultimately known as unintended consequences, which is the actual crash itself. And what I've found in many of the many developing countries around the world is that if you look at these dominoes, with the last domino actually being the crash, many countries, their culture is such that they will only be focused on maybe the last few dominoes. So let's say you have 10 dominoes, and these dominoes go falling over, leading to the actual accident itself. Many of the authorities are not empowered to go prior to the direct immediate cause. They're looking more at the direct immediate cause and not necessarily at the indirect root causes. By the way, this could also be known as systemic causes or underlying causes. And it tends to be focused more on the latter part. Whereas the NTSB, we're required to look at everything, right from the very beginning. And we find that most of the underlying reasons, systemic reasons, is in management. Usually management is usually the area where this chain of events first started, and that's why I wanted to show you these dominoes. As I'm talking, I don't know whether I'm being heard or not. Is everybody hearing everything okay?
Very good, sir. Thank you very much.
Okay. I'm just not getting any feedback as I thought. And by the way, if there's any questions along the way, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Thank you. We'll let you know.
Okay, and again, I want to go to my next slide, so I think I'm going to have to come out and in again, so bear with me. Did the screen change?
Yes, it did too.
Okay. This is something that investigators at the NTSB use as part of their investigative reasoning. Now, that very top event, just think of that very top box, a rectangle, as being one of the dominoes. Okay? That's a domino that you saw in the previous slide. And under that is the areas that we look at to look for the areas of underlying and systemic and root causes underneath them. And when we do our training, and I've done a lot of training in this area as an instructor, we spend about a day in each one of these boxes. And if you look at the house outline there, and just take a few moments to take a look at it, the very top area you'll see human error, equipment failure, and external. I hope this, I'm not sure this is going to be able to show the animation I have, but I'll give it a try. The human error operational, as you can see, the underneath it branches out to a whole bunch of different areas. And likewise with equipment failure and external. And during the course of our investigation, we're looking at these particular areas. And I've used this as a checklist for my investigation for years. This is what is known as the investigator reasoning chart. Again, the very top event would be a domino, one of those dominoes that are flung, or shall I say, sequence of events. Just for example, if we look at the human error operational, as you go down and you look at the branches, you can, down in the lower branches, for example, you would see physical condition. That would indicate we're looking at the operator, whether that's the pilot or a maintenance person or someone else who's involved with the accident. You know, their physical condition at the time. I've done a number of accidents when there's been impairment, incapacitation of the person. You also see the man-machine interface. That's ergonomic, if you're familiar with that term. Procedures, which is standard operating procedures, training, supervision, communication, operational hazards, planning records. Those are all the kinds of things that are underlying under the human error operational. And again, if you look at the equipment failure, you see manufacturing, installation, misuse, maintenance, design. The failure of equipment could be due to a number of reasons, not just because there was a malfunction per se, but there could be misuse or maintenance involvement with equipment failure, and sometimes even in manufacturing installation. And we're looking at those kinds of issues in the design, and some of you may be familiar with the Boeing 737 MAX that was grounded for almost 2 years. There were a lot of design-related issues, and you see the box with design underneath that. You can see things such as requirement specifications, verification, validation, requirement for implementation, safety, reliability assessment. We spent quite a bit of time during our investigation under the design aspects of that particular accident. I'm going to try to move to the other slide. Bear with me.
Yes.
Can you see the new slide?
The new slide, yes, sir, but I think, yes, the new slide is perfectly seen.
Okay. You can, I couldn't hear you. You can't see the slide?
Yes, we can, sir. We can see it perfectly.
But anyway, this is just basically a very brief explanation of what an event is. Again, one of those dominoes we saw earlier. And I'll read that. It's an equipment failure, human error, or external event in the accident, time and space contributing to the accident, probable cause. I'll move to my next slide.
Yeah, read it. We see it.
Okay, I'm back to my original slide. Can you see that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'm just moving along. Normally this is an animation, so unfortunately the way we're configured right now, I'm not able to show the animation aspect of it, but let's see what we can get here. Okay, and the equipment failure is where the actual equipment performance deviates from desired performance. Very simple. Actual equipment performance deviates from desired performance. Okay, the slides are not actually responding to my movement, but what I want to talk about now is the recommendations process at the NTSB. As I said earlier, the ultimate goal of an accident investigation is to develop or to establish probable cause and contributing factors. And from that, we can move towards the area of making recommendations. The NTSB issues many recommendations following an accident, and those recommendations are made to various parties. We call them addressees. Quite often it's the regulator, in our country it's the FAA, and but also to the manufacturers, and sometimes airlines and other recommendations are made. 80% of those, let me back up, those recommendations are just what they are. They're recommended and not mandates. These recommendations are made to those addressees, and they have 60 days to respond to the recommendation. And 80% of the NTS, 80 to 85% of the NTSB recommendations are adopted. After 60 days, the addressee responds to us on what actions they're going to take, and then the NTSB will respond on whether of our opinion or what we call the status of the recommendation. So sometimes the respondee or the addressee will respond, and we may find that their response is unacceptable, and we so state that. And we make a record of all of our responses to those recommendations. We make those publicly now. Because of the stature of the NTSB worldwide, we find that most recommendations are adopted. Now, recommendations themselves are formal processes, but the majority of the corrective actions that take place during an investigation are what we call safety accomplishment. Those are done informally. will be on the scene of an accident or during the course of the investigation, which incidentally most investigations take about a year to 18 months. Safety hazards are noted, deficiencies are noted, and were brought to the attention to the responsible organization. And quite often, just from that alone, they take action. They take action. They don't even need a formal request for that to be done. The majority, the formal recommendations that goes public are generally those that will have industry implication, worldwide implication. And again, we make that information known. I'd like to stop at this point to see if there's any questions.
¿Quiere ver si hay alguna pregunta? Yes, I'm translating, sir, so that if there's any questions. Si hay alguna pregunta? Okay. Yes, there's one. We want to know if on these recommendations, do all the countries take upon the recommendations when you're in another country investigating an accident? Do the countries adopt the recommendations that you guys do?
Okay. The recommendations, and I should make something clear. When the NTSB participate in investigations around the world, that country is responsible for the investigation. We're there solely as participants. However, when we're doing a U.S. investigation and make recommendations, we will issue our recommendations to that government. So, for example, if we had an accident in the U.S. involving a Mexican airline, and during the course of our investigation, we will make our recommendations to the Mexican government. It's up for the Mexican government to follow up on that. Keep in mind that as the U.S. government, we make recommendations. There's no requirement for anyone other than someone from the U.S. to respond to that. So we will actually submit our recommendations to the government, and then it's up to them to submit those recommendations to whoever the pertinent party is.
Yes, we appreciate very much what you're saying, and we understand very much what you're saying, because right now we are comparing, or I am comparing the NTDS as the Mexican Federation, because we're here right now gathered. I believe Dr. Paul Barash told you a lot about what was happening here in Mexico. We have now 31 deaths of some fungus that has never been seen anywhere else in the world. There's no place in the world where we have 31 deaths, and then there's still some people right now, some of the patients are right now in ICU, and they're not expecting a good outcome. So the numbers are going to grow, and there's a lot of difficulty in this, Mr. Dennis Jones, because the patients that have survived, we have a bad news for them. They might get the disease again in months later, weeks later, years later. There are reports that 10 years later the patients have the symptoms and might die because the fungus comes back again. So right now what we're getting, and I appreciate very much, is very important things that you're saying, where that's what the Mexican Federation of Anesthesiologists has to act, and that is find out what happened. Not who did it, who was the blame. That's not our part. We're not a judicial, and make the adequate recommendations to the doctors, to the government, to the institutions, to the people involved. Just make the adequate recommendations. So we're learning a lot from you, and thank you very much. So if you want to go on, we're ready to listen.
Okay. I appreciate what you said, and a simple way that we put it, the NTSB is into fact-finding. We're not into fault-finding. And I say that's exactly what you're saying, so I'm glad to hear that. Again, the investigative process itself, the ultimate goal is for safety recommendations or corrective action, to put it generally, and make changes so it doesn't happen again. I've often used the expression, our job is to take a mess and turn it into a message, and that's our goal, the NTSB.
I'm
I mentioned earlier about NTSB reports cannot be used in a court of law. I have never been in court a day of my life.
Okay.
First of all, it is investigation.
I'm going to take this.
Congress there, so.
I'm going to take this a little bit different because of the interaction, and so that we can get a full understanding. I'm going to speak in Spanish for them. Miren, dicen que esto es muy importante, por eso me tomé la libertad de detenerlo un poco. Le simula mucho su organización, la que él dirigió, a lo que la federación está intentando de hacer. Lo que nosotros queremos hacer y lo que su agencia hacía, esta agencia tan importante, nunca es juzgar, nunca es encontrar culpables, sino encontrar los hechos de qué fue lo que pasó, y una vez que se tenga la idea de cuál fue la causa, cuáles fueron las pruebas científicas que se tuvieron, hacer las recomendaciones adecuadas a las diferentes instituciones involucradas. Es decir, una vez que la federación sepa qué es lo que pasó, hacer las recomendaciones adecuadas a las compañías de los laboratorios, hacer las recomendaciones adecuadas a los hospitales, a los anestesiólogos, a los cirujanos, a las enfermeras. Eso es lo que su agencia hace en todo el mundo. Ir, buscar los hechos, buscar los datos, tener la ciencia de lo que pasó y a través de lo que encontraron hacer las recomendaciones para que todos sigan y mejoren y no vuelva a ocurrir el accidente. Thank you, sir. Go ahead, please. Yes, sir. You can go ahead. Thank you.
Oh, okay. No, at this point, I really had no more points to say unless there was some question. I mean, I can continue on with a lot of other areas, but
Dennis?
trying to be mindful of the time.
Thank you.
Dennis. Available for questions. One point
Dennis,
I did
there's a
want
question
to bring
here. Dennis,
is that for an NTSB investigation, yes.
Sorry, we have a bit of a lag in time. There's a question here. Is it realistic to spend 12 to 18 months on an investigation? Is that a good use of resources, and can it be done in half the time or less?
Que si pregunta el doctor Barash que si 12 meses o 18 son suficientes o son una exageración para una investigación, porque es lo que tardan en promedio ellos en una investigación. Yes, we're listening to your answer, sir.
Yeah, no, that is typical worldwide. About a year to 18 months. If you notice my diagram, you saw all of those boxes. Each one of those boxes we're looking at takes months and months to look at to try to determine what was the sequence of events leading to the accident. And I would say the fastest investigation that I can recall in recent years, even internationally. And this again is for a major investigation. Now, some of the smaller aircraft, small airplanes, we can do much quicker. But for a catastrophic accident, where we're really looking at things very diligently, it takes about a year to 18 months.
Okay. Mire, le pregunta el doctor Paul Moraz que si el tiempo ese que ellos tardan en investigar algún procedimiento de investigación, vamos a suponer un accidente aéreo grande, que si 12 o 18 meses es mucho tiempo, y él dice que no, porque hay que investigar todo y tener todos los factores compuestos para que saber exactamente y poder hacer las recomendaciones adecuadas, que en casos más pequeños pueden tardar menos, pero para tener la realidad de lo que está sucediendo es el tiempo que aproximadamente se necesita, y esto yo creo que lo hizo el doctor Paul para que vieran que esto que está sucediendo aquí no es algo que se puede resolver inmediatamente.
Dennis, what skills would you say are needed to set up a proper investigation? What type of trainings or what type of life experience would allow investigators of a major, say, cluster of death? What would be the skills that would be needed in your mind?
¿Cuáles son los ¿Cuáles son los requerimientos que se necesitan de habilidades para unos investigadores para investigar un caso como este de muertes masivas? Yes, sir, we're listening.
Okay, I could hear the translator very well, but I didn't hear the question. That was going to be my point. I translated very clear. I didn't hear the question.
Dr. Paul?
I'm not sure why it's not here.
Dennis, can you hear me?
I can barely hear you. Go ahead.
Dennis, can you hear me now? question is, what skills are needed in order to do a proper investigation of this magnitude?
Oh, okay. Well, you can imagine there's a number of disciplines involved in the investigation. Now, my role, and I have a very background, besides being a pilot, I'm an aerospace engineer, and have extensive work flying and then also doing maintenance on aircraft. I serve as an investigator in charge, but under me are different people with different disciplines. For example, I have people who are experts in human performance, those who are experts in aircraft structures, witness interviewing. We do a lot of scientific work during the course of our investigation. So we have that kind of expertise. We have meteorologists who are part of our investigation. And I will say this, is that during an NTSB investigation, we do have participation by the manufacturers, by the industry, those that we select to assist us, because we realize that as good as we are, we don't have all the expertise. So we have what is known as a party system, where we allow the manufacturer, the operator, and the regulator to participate in our investigation. The only ones that we exclude from our investigation that we're not allowed to designate are legal lawyers and insurance. By law, we're not allowed to let them participate in our investigation.
Bien, dice que el sistema de trabajo de la NTBS es el siguiente. Ellos necesitan un equipo multidisciplinario para poder llevar a cabo las investigaciones. ¿De qué consiste ese equipo? Equipo que sepa identificar e interrogar a las personas involucradas. Un equipo experto en todos los aparatos tecnológicos que se usaron o que se están utilizando. En todo, especialistas en factores humanos, en factores que pueden, especialistas en personas que puedan identificar algún error humano y llevar a cabo ese dato y trasladarlo a una realidad. Que es un equipo donde también invitan a los manufactores de todas las piezas que están involucradas en las posibles causas o fallas. Es decir, si lo trasladamos a lo que la Federación quiere establecer, pues sería investigar con los laboratorios, las jeringas, las agujas, darles oportunidad a que ellos también digan qué es lo que pasó, qué es lo que pudo haber pasado, si es que ellos pudieran tener causa o parte en del accidente, ¿sí? Pero dice que a todos ellos los tienen que invitar porque es un equipo donde tratan de armar el rompecabezas y tener los datos más fidedignos posibles. Que a los únicos que no pueden invitar por ley en una investigación es a los abogados y a las compañías de seguros. Es una ley internacional donde cuando ellos participan en investigaciones científicas, abogados y seguros no pueden participar por ley. Thank you very much. You can continue, sir.
Okay, and as far as the probable cause and conclusions, that is made by the NTSB. The industry participates to provide us technical expertise as needed, and but ultimately it's the NTSB who's responsible for determining probable cause of the accident.
Dice que algo muy importante, que algo muy importante que quede bien claro. Todos los que participan en el apoyo para la NTSB, todos los que participan para llegar a las conclusiones, las industrias, los manufacturantes, los que ayudan con los factores humanos, todos ellos no pueden llegar a conclusiones ni hacer conclusiones. El único autorizado para hacer conclusiones es la agencia de investigación. Yes, sir?
Yeah, and one other point I wanted to mention about work that we do. We also do what is known as special studies. If we see a trend in particular accidents, we will do a special study of that particular issue, and then from that special study, we will issue recommendations. And I'll give you an example. Several years ago, we had a rash or several accidents involving emergency medical service helicopters, or what is known as medevac helicopters, that were crashing. And so we did a special study in which we looked at a number of those cases, and as a result, we issued recommendations. So that is another way that we issue recommendations is through our special studies.
Bien, dice que si ven algo en particular, diferente, algo que les llame la atención, algo especial, entonces ellos tienen un programa que se llama Estudios Especiales, que se refiere a investigar algo a profundidad de algún evento adverso, algún evento que encontraron durante la investigación que no fuera común. And we have one other question, sir. What should health workers systems all over the world, what can they learn from your agency, from the one that you directed, the one that you participated, investigated, grew up with, and just retired from? What can the healthcare system, what would you think we can learn from you and we can copy you or try to imitate?
Very good question. Is to be very vigilant about the work that accidents, because we want to be able to disclose problems before they actually occur. I mean, that's the whole purpose of it, is to find safety hazards and deficiencies in the system before they occur. The NTSB is a responsive agency, but you need to be proactive to keep these occurrences from happening. So that's why we do as much as we can from a proactive point of view, as well as safety advocacies to prevent it from occurring. So the point that I would like to say that I believe would be helpful worldwide is safety advocacy as a result of an agency like the National Transportation Safety Board, and being proactive to prevent accidents from occurring in the first place. And what I mean by that is it doesn't take accidents. We also monitor incidents, because incidents and accidents tend to be pretty much the same. It just happen to be circumstances surrounding an incident, but there are many incidents that we look at and we do investigations of, and then those have helped us prevent accidents.
Well, sir, I mean, like I said, one of the commentaries that I made, it's so alike. You're an example to follow to the world, and I think this is going to be a life-changing experience for the Federation, having you telling this. You have made thousands of reports and recommendations, and they have been followed, and you changed the course of safety through aviation and probably in lots of transportation areas. And what you're saying is exactly the parameters and the vision that as health workers we need. We need to really get the causes, not to blame anybody, not to hurt anybody, but to prevent this from happening again. I don't know if Dr. Paul Barash wants to add something to this, but I think it's the perfect model to follow, and it's going to really change the lives and the way we work here in Mexico, thanks to what you are showing us now. Dr. Paul?
Dennis, thanks. That was fantastic. Sorry about the technical issues here. We're looking forward to including you in the investigation. Gerardo here is going to be leading a committee around that to better understand what went on and how the Federation in Mexico can be a national leader for improving the safety of healthcare. Thank you so much for your time, and any final thoughts to leave with the audience?
No, you guys you've been very patient, and again, I'd just like to say we want to take a mess and turn it into a message.
Okay, that was great. Miren, dice que lo que el último mensaje que él quiere decir, lo que dijo hace rato en una de sus, al principio, dijo que la parte del proyecto que él, de sus palabras que él dice y que están ahora incrustadas, ¿verdad?, dentro de su organización, es que quieren hacer de un desastre un mensaje. Y ese mensaje que tiene que ser con unos objetivos, lo dijo al principio. Y el objetivo principal que debe de tener ese mensaje que sacan del desastre es prevenir que vuelva a ocurrir otra vez. Wow, yo estoy impresionado porque esa agencia tiene los mismos objetivos que debe de tener y que seguramente Enrique enforzará dentro de la federación para que no vuelvan a suceder estos errores. Yo creo que ahora sí un fuerte aplauso, que lo oiga hasta allá, hasta Washington. To hear the applause, but the people are We're really applauding. Thank you very much, Dennis. It's a pleasure, a joy hearing your speech. Thank you for your patience. This is our first meeting, and many more are going to come in, and it's going to help us to rectify these type of setbacks that we have right now with technical issues. Thank you. Have a great day, Mr. Jones.
Thank you very much for inviting me. It's been a joy, and please contact me at any time. I'm looking forward to helping you as needed.
Thank you. Dice que muchas gracias a todos por su paciencia, por estas dificultades técnicas, y dice que lo contactemos cuando lo necesitemos para que nos siga apoyando en las investigaciones o en la forma en cómo conducir las investigaciones. Thank you, Sir Paul.
Bye, Dennis. We'll set up some time to talk next week. Thanks so much for this incredible effort. Thank you. Formal comments. Eduardo?
Hello, Henry. Nice to see you again. Look at this. It's a pleasure to meet with you again, to see you through the screen, through these wonderful ways of communication. Now it's been a long time since I hadn't been able to see you. I'm going to do the introduction in Spanish, so if you can bear with me for just a little bit. Le digo a Andrés que me da mucho gusto de verlo otra vez. Hacía años que no lo veía, que no podía compartir con él, y que me da gusto a través de este medio poderlo contactar. André es una eminencia en cuanto a seguridad. Sobre todo él se maneja mucho en seguridad obstétrica. Él fue hasta director de la universidad en Australia, una de las principales universidades. Él es consejero primario, es el primer consejero de seguridad de la OMS. Es una persona muy importante. Su currículum es muy extenso, pero él pertenece y es miembro honorario de por vida del colegio Royal College de allá de Australia, de Inglaterra y de Europa. Entonces, él es una autoridad mundial, y estamos súper agradecidos porque él nos pueda acompañar para estas charlas y que nos pueda apoyar con cualquiera de los conocimientos, y sobre todo a lo mejor a través de la organización mundial para guiarnos en llegar a nuestras conclusiones como federación. André, les pido un fuerte aplauso, por favor.
Talking just after Dennis Jones. I think we both are ambassadors for safety. So I'm going to talk about safety in obstetric anesthesia. Just now, what is the next? I'm sorry. Now, just to know how many, where are the next 1,000 babies born in the world? As you can see in the Americas, 100 babies, in Europe 50 babies, and Africa more than 300, more than 500 in Asia. And that is just during the lecture of 5 minutes. So in a lecture of half an hour, that means 6,000 babies. So it's quite a number. Yeah. It's going very fast, and what we want to do is make sure that we can provide good anesthesia to all our patients. Yeah. You see, in the more than 12,000 years ago, the population in the world was only 4 million patients. Can you see that here? Yeah. And it took up till the 1800s before it really went up. But since the 19th century, we see an increase in the population very fast going up. And that is due to a better sewer system, clear water, better housing, and more and abundant food. Yeah. You see, just on the 15th of November last year, the world population reached 8 billion people. And in Mexico, 129 million people. That is exactly the number of people that are born every day. And you see that on top of here, 130 million births of baby, million births and 60 million deaths. That means there's a growth of 66 million people every year in the world, which is 50% more than in the 1950s. The population increases substantially in China, but even more in India, and you see the number are going up for a number of years in Mexico, and then it will come down. So we are here for the population in Mexico, right here. It will go up till the mid-21st century, and then it will come down. So the number of maternal deaths, the number of maternal deaths by a region, as you can see, there were not so long ago there were 600,000 deaths every year in the world due to pregnancy. Yeah. That's come down. I have to move this one again.
I think you've muted, sir. We cannot hear you anymore. You're muted. I think you pressed the mute. Can you hear me, Andre? Can you hear me? Andre, can you hear me? We cannot hear you, Andre. We cannot hear you. The mute. I think that.
Okay. I tried to clear my slides. That's it. Yeah. So can you see that is where Mexico was a couple of years ago, and that the increase in the number of births is increasing till the mid-21st century, and then towards the end it will come down. Yeah. The number of maternal deaths in the past, not so long ago, was 600,000 deaths, maternal deaths, yeah, in the whole world. It has come down till about 300,000 deaths, as you can see. So how many women can we save from dying in pregnancy or childbirth? That is so an important question. Hawkins, a long time ago, and you can see that the period from 79 till 90, saw that the majority of the patients dying in maternal deaths was due to general anesthesia, the black graft in here. Yeah. Regional anesthesia was much lower and much safer. And you see, of the 129 patients who died, this cesarean section was 106, vaginal delivery only 6. So I think cesarean section is still a more dangerous event for a woman than vaginal delivery. And everywhere in the world, the changes are absolutely clear. You see, the absolute change from 2000 to 2001 is virtually 30% everywhere. And in Mexico, it was even the decrease in the number of maternal deaths decreased substantially with 43%. Black women in the United States seem to be more affected by death during childbirth than US average, and this is for Mexico. Plus medicine gave us a variation in use of childbirth interventions in 13 high-income countries. And what you can see in here, we see Finland, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, etc., the UK, the Netherlands, also Malta, and the United States and Chile. And you see the place of birth is virtually always in a hospital. As you can see, the numbers in the red square, it's 99% all the time, but not in the United Kingdom, where there are special birth centers, or in the Netherlands, where still almost 15% of the babies are born at home. Yeah, a very unique situation. Yeah. Spontaneous delivery, you can see it is 70%, 80%, and a little bit less in the United States, where we see that the instrumental delivery rate is going up, and especially the cesarean section delivery rate is going very high. In Chile, it is 48% of all the patients delivered via a cesarean section, which is a little bit odd, and I'm not going too deep into that. You see everywhere in the world, you see an increase in the number of cesarean sections, and this is, for instance, in countries where, for instance, like in South America, and this is in Africa. I think the cesarean section rate of 4% in Africa is not good enough. That will cause maternal death, fetal deaths, etc. But perhaps 44% is also a little bit exaggerated. And And I see it from Mexico City, for instance, in this publication. It's 45% of all the babies are born via a cesarean section way. Yeah? And even in the private sector, according to this publication, it's more than 70 to 80% of all the patients delivered via cesarean section. So the World Health Organization has said that in the past the optimal cesarean delivery rate is 10 to 15, but they recently have upgraded that to 19 cesarean deliveries per 100 live births. There are challenges everywhere in the world, and every country has its particulars. For instance, in Japan, I just found this recent publication here, only 6% of Japanese parturients receive labor analgesia. That's in contrast to the United States, where 70% will receive labor analgesia via an epidural. We have, for vaginal delivery, cesarean deliveries, and others, we have 3 opportunities: spinal anesthesia, epidural, or a combination of the 2. You see very clear here the ligamentum flavum, a 2-in needle into the epidural space, and a long spinal needle going into the subarachnoid space. Backs of women are not always the easiest, as you can see here. And what we face nowadays, more morbidity, more obesity. Obese patients are challenging for the anesthetists to put in the epidural catheter. I'm not going to talk about all the modern deliveries that are possible via all these pumps, etc. Because you see here in the blue the segment of a spread of a continuous epidural infusions, and this is with programmed intermittent epidural boluses. Yeah. It is a little bit more accurate spread everywhere, as you can see. Now, the World Health Organization made recommendations on the use of epidural analgesia for pain relief during labor, and I recommend you to read all these kind of recommendations. We want to provide safe epidural and safe spinals to our mothers so that they can deliver a healthy baby. That is our goal. Staying comfortable in labor while getting your epidural on spinal, that is what we want to do. And even epidurals seems to decrease severe maternal morbidity risk. So in the past they always were blaming anesthesia, and nowadays they are hailing our techniques. So because they are lowering all the odds of morbidity and mortality. And obviously we know that pain during childbirth creates stress, increases the autonomic activities, increases catecholamines, and that means that the patients, the umbilicus will go in vasoconstriction with decreased placental perfusion, and in fact we have the hyperventilation with respiratory alkalosis that is compensated in a metabolic acidosis, and that goes via the placenta and to the fetus. So the outcome of pain during labor will be metabolic acidosis in the fetus, and that will result in fetal cerebral oxygenation decreasing, and that's not a good outcome for the baby. So I think by taking away the pain, there's no reason why a woman should experience pain. By taking away the pain, the patient will be better off, herself and her baby. Yeah. So use of labor neuraxial analgesia for vaginal delivery and severe maternal morbidity, we see it's associated with a decrease in 40% of this severe maternal morbidities. So that's good. So obstetric anesthesia, it's all about using a meticulous technique, correct timing, fine-tuning, and administering just enough to do the job. You see, vaginal delivery, we need to take care of T10 till TL1, and in the second phase, the expulsion phase, it's S2 and S4. That's enough, no more than that. For cesarean delivery, we have to go up all the way till T4 to take the pain away of the patient. We have a different technique, spinal needles, as you can see, epidural 2-in needles, and the combination of the two, and that is well known. Now, I refer to this very old publication in 1979 from Dr. Albright, who wrote about cardiac arrest following regional anesthesia using etidocaine and bupivacaine. since, and I must say, when I started writing my thesis on obstetric epidural analgesia using the very low dose concentration, low dose and low concentration technique in epidural anesthesia, in the United States they were propagating using for cesarean section 0.75% of bupivacaine and 0.5% of bupivacaine, whereas in the UK they are 0.5 or 0.25% of lidocaine. But that caused these enormous numbers of maternal deaths, and at a certain point of time, bupivacaine 0.75 was withdrawn from obstetric practice in 1984, and no maternal deaths have occurred laboring in the United States from bupivacaine-induced cardiotoxicity. And that means 63 million vaginal births and 20 million epidural anesthetics. So most of them receive bupivacaine. So coming down from that concentration is certainly important. And nowadays, we propagate 0.125%. Toxicity of chloroquine and sodium bisulfate in humans is clearly demonstrated in the basic literature, but also in patients, so we should avoid these kind of things. Spinal anesthesia, we have numbers of opportunities, and you see here a whole list of local anesthetics that can be used. But do not use the chloroquine if there's bisulfite added to it. Safety in obstetric anesthesia is about fine-tuning. We all can administer spinals and epidurals and catheters, etc. But in obstetric anesthesia, you have to do that fine-tuning all the time, and that is very important. So the concern of the anesthesiologist is safety first. It should come first because you have to deal with two patients, the mother and the baby. The mother should get just enough to get pain relief. The baby should not be given too much because that's a bad outcome for the baby. That is what we do. Now, after Albright's study, all journals in the world were looking what is the best test dose in obstetric anesthesia. And I came up with the idea of every dose in epidural anesthesia for vaginal delivery should be a test dose, and it can be a test dose. If you administer 10 mils of bupivacaine, 0.125% plus epinephrine, 12.5 micrograms, you can use it anywhere, and I will come to that in a moment. So safety first. Never use more than a test dose in obstetrics. And even when you're using combined spinal epidural, the epidural test dose are not necessary because you can use it as a very low dose. So I came up with that idea, bupivacaine 0.125%, with epinephrine 1 in 800,000, which is 12.5 milligrams of bupivacaine and 12.5 micrograms of epinephrine. So the test dose is used to rule out intravenous injection. There should be no IV toxicity, no cardiac toxicity with these kind of doses. It is an effective epidural dose for vaginal delivery. There are no massive epidurals if you follow this regimen. It's an effective subarachnoid dose for cesarean delivery. Suppose you are injecting this accidentally into the subarachnoid space. It's not causing a total spinal. You can even do a cesarean section. And if you inject it in the subcutaneous region, it will not harm the patient. So the epinephrine added to the solution is to rule out IV position of catheters because it will produce tachycardia. And the local anesthetic is just enough to rule out the spinal. So you will detect immediately a solid spinal block that will prevent you from injecting more. So every dose in epidural anesthesia for vaginal delivery is a test dose. And no dose injected in obstetrics should be more than the test dose. Each injection is a test dose for all intermittent injections. And for continuous infusions or combined spinal epidurals, the first dose is a test dose. I give you some of these examples. Many are published in high impact journals like anesthesiology. Every dose given in epidural anesthesia can be a test dose. You see here the maternal heart rate. If a test dose is injected, You see there's a temporary, but clear increase in the heart rate when you monitor the maternal heart rate. You see that in 3 of these cases. So we provided how to do ECG monitoring on the mother, and I think it is something we should do. And we provided several methods, and please read that in anesthesiology. And again, using that, you see a clear indication of a temporary increase, not harming the patient, but an increase from around 90 to 140 in this particular case. And what you see, the uterine contractions, usually one of these contractions is just skipped or of lower intensity, that's all. It is a reliable test, and we published it over and over again, to detect inadvertent intravascular injections in obstetrics. Identification of these intravenous placement were published in anesthesiology. You can see in 2 of these cases, very clear cases, where we actually could find, after several hours of the use of an epidural in an obstetric patient for vaginal delivery, but she was really not sitting still all the time, she was wiggling around, and eventually we saw that the catheter was invading a vein, and that resulted that we could detect it. So ECG monitor of mother and fetus during epidural anesthesia is certainly important. Now you could say, okay, but if you're going to inject 10 mils of 0.125% in the subarachnoid space, that is going to produce a hell of a block, and that's not true. So we published in anesthesiology high volume spinal anesthesia with bupivacaine 12.5 milligram. Okay, and you see the extent of the block. It is around P3. Virtually within 2 minutes, you see P9 is already blocked, and that was in 20 women undergoing cesarean section with the use of bupivacaine 0.125%. So it's clearly indicated it's a safe block for at least 1 hour, and then it wears off till it's completely worn off after 4 hours. The motor blockade is, according to Bromwich scale, maximum is 3, and that can be achieved within 5-7 minutes and for about almost 2 hours. And the systolic blood pressure and the diastolic blood pressure and heart rate were within reasonable areas, nothing to worry. Now we even described a new technique how to measure that, because we should not use a Bromwich block. The Bromwich block is for the lower extremities. The RAM block is for evaluation in obstetrics, because we are interested in what's happening in the abdomen. The RAM block is the rectus abdominis muscle. That is what we are testing in. And you see the patient, the parturient rises from a completely horizontal position, and she can do that in a vertical position. We say the rectus abdominis muscle is 100% intact, okay, if you can do that. If you have to bring your arms, by extending your arms forward, it's 80% powers. And if you only can lift the scapulae, it's 60% power. If you only can lift the shoulders, it's 40%. And if I only can feel it by touching the abdomen, it's 20% powers. Now by measuring this test just before delivery, and you deduct that the RAM test before the epidural block was instituted, you will get the RAM block. That is exactly what you have done with your epidural. So you do the test before delivery, and you do the test before you have instituted the epidural. And we could see also that the plasma concentrations, we measured the plasma concentrations in the mother using epidural bupivacaine 12.5 milligrams versus 37.5 milligrams. And you can see these are the plasma concentrations. They were way above, much higher, 4 times as much as the highest, and you can see it after 3 injections into the mother. The plasma concentrations we obtained with this particular technique were the lowest in the whole world. You can see all these publications here, even when they were using 0.75%. Now the extent of the block and the hemodynamic effects, you see minutes after the extent of the block of 12.5 milligrams of bupivacaine, either in 2.5 mils or in 10 mils, it has the same effect. Also the hemodynamic effects, the motor blockade is the same. So dose is the most important, not the volume, not the concentration. And we did even a spinal anesthetic. This was not done but in urology patients, where we put in a catheter into the subarachnoid space. We injected local anesthetics. The dose was 70 milligrams all the time, either in a high volume, 40 mils, 0.5%, or 0.7 mils, 10%, and in between those. And you can see, in fact, it's all the time the same. Dose is important, volume and concentrations are less important. And that is when you inject your local anesthetic here, it stays here. It's not going up too far away into the thoracic region. And that is so important that if you do use these test doses, it is safe all the time. We even did in almost 1,000 babies born vaginal deliveries, and we were comparing spontaneous delivery babies or instrumental deliveries in an epidural group versus a control group. Because what was the reason? Many patients are, many doctors and obstetricians always thought, okay, the more we do epidurals, the more there are instrumental deliveries, so that's bad for the patient. And we could prove that in the epidural group that is even lower hemorrhages than in the control. So we do it for the better of the patients. Yeah. This was the basic of my thesis, and we wrote, when I was at Harvard, we wrote an 1,100 pages book on this one. Local anesthetics and opioids, that's important. Yeah. We have a lot of, a whole list of recipes that we can use. And using, for instance, in epidural or combined spinal, when you add on opioids, you will see that the duration of analgesia can increase. But what you want to do is spread the local anesthetic just enough to do the job and make the parturient pain-free with no impact on the baby. Yeah. Ambulation is possible with this technique, and if you use a low-dose technique. The initial dose in the subarachnoid space, addition of an opioid and top-ups or continuous infusion, that is what we can do. But even in the best hands, it's not always perfect, and failure rates do occur. So the choice of reasonable block is important. You need to be very confident in what you're doing with your positioning, your knowledge of your block, the anatomy, the physiology, the side effects, and way out. That is a skillful anesthetist. Evaluate your block, the extent of your block, the motor block, and liberal use of catheters, that's important. It's not a failed block, but the inadequacy of the management of the failed block means poor anesthesia performance. And possible options, if there's an incomplete block, you can redo the block, but be careful, and perform a second, maybe a different block, add opioids or sedatives, and that's the least, what you want to do is to provide general anesthesia. Attention to detail, provide sedation if it is requested by the patient, and give some distraction, talk to the patient. What can I do in obstetric for cesarean section? Avoid general anesthesia. Regional anesthesia is still the number one. Ketamine in small doses can be given for vaginal deliveries, combined spinal epidural, perhaps entonox, but that's not so good for the environment, or an epidural expansion technique. Most common causes of inadequate spinal anesthesia is unable to locate the CSF with bone contact, inability to aspirate. If there's no CSF, there's no block. And surgery outlasting the drug selected, usually that's not a problem in obstetrics. There are many factors affecting the height of the block, it's spinal anesthesia, baricity, the position, the dose, and I think that's one of the most important, and the site of injection. Stay put where you are if you're using the local anesthetics. Hyperbaric, it goes up. Hyperbaric, it stays down. Evaluate your block. That is important. A sympathetic block, yeah, it's higher, and the motor block is usually lower. Failure rate, it has been looked up, and please look this up from Dr. Stephen Kinsella in anesthesia. Insufficient repeating the spinal block, I'm not going too deep to that. There are numbers of reasons why there's a failure of the block. We have not talked about infection, but obviously there's an issue with COVID-19, and you can find 1,000 manuscripts on this topic already. A recent survey in aseptic techniques used in labor anesthesia revealed that we really need to do a better job. There's such a range of variety, as you can see here, yeah? And we need to take care of hand cleaning, use of antiseptic solutions, and support team. Also the support team in the room should wear a mask. I think that is important. So in conclusion, successful pain-free reason anesthesia in obstetrics is possible. It requires meticulous attention to detail, and I hope you can help a lot of your patients. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. Let's see if there's any questions. ¿Alguna pregunta del público? ¿Alguien tiene alguna pregunta? Well, we have a couple of them. For example, the use of ketamine in your country is still available for the practice and safe practice of anesthesia?
Yes, ketamine is still available. It's not used that widely anymore, but it's still available. And I think minute doses of ketamine, if there's an incomplete cesarean section, not complete pain-free cesarean section, and you see that the patient is suffering, why don't you give 1 or 2 mils of ketamine? It will help.
Okay. It's not available in Mexico anymore for a year approximately. And what about the combination of opioids and local anesthesia? Le pregunto sobre la combinación de anestésicos locales con opioides. The combination of opioids or morphine with local anesthesics.
Yeah. I'm much in favor of sufentanil myself. I think that's one of the safest drugs to use. And if there's a complication of apnea, you will see it within an hour. Whereas with fentanyl, you may see it maybe in several hours. And with morphine, you may see it after 24 hours. So for me, sufentanil is very safe, and if you add that on, it prolongs the duration of analgesia to a single shot. Absolutely.
Let me translate. Le pregunto sobre la combinación de anestésicos locales con morfínicos, con opioides, y dice que él prefiere el sulfentanil, que el cual, en caso de que fuese a haber un problema de respiratorio con los pacientes, los signos empiezan en 1 hora. Si utilizas fentanil, pueden empezar hasta 12 horas después, y si utilizas morfina 12 horas después, y el fentanil hasta 24 horas después, pueden iniciar con problemas respiratorios, de signos respiratorios. Paul? Yes, I was telling them about your response for the use of combination of morphine with Okay, I was asking them about, I was translating your response about the combination of morphine can you understand me here? Now?
I can hear you, but I do not understand. It's not loud enough.
What about now? Is it better? Better?
Okay.
Yes? I was just doing the translation of your response for the use of combining morphines or opioids with local anesthesia.
Yes.
And I was just translating your response to them.
Sorry.
Okay. And one last question, sir. Infections. What are the rate of infections that you have seen using these local anesthetic techniques?
question to ask. It's a very important one, though. And I translated earlier this week a text which I found when I was a professor of anesthesia in the Netherlands, where they found meningitis in a number of cases published. But recently, I don't see that anymore. We are using sterile trays, we are using gowns, we are using all kinds of precautions, and we don't see that anymore. I think one of the items to look at is how is your local anesthetic delivered? In what ample? Who is producing these local anesthetics? Yeah? And make sure that you're using sterile trays where everything is put on, so that you do not need to do add-ons, because the moment that you break the chain, the moment is there that bacteria can enter the patient.
Okay, I'll translate. I'm going to translate, okay? Le pregunto que qué porcentaje que ha visto él con las infecciones en los anestésicos cuando se produce la anestesia regional, y me dice que cuando él era estudiante, cuando él era profesor, después incluso hubo algunos casos de meningitis séptica, pero que durante los últimos años, en eras modernas, no ha encontrado casos de meningitis séptica en reportados, que eso definitivamente se debe a la técnica mejorada, un cuidado con la técnica, pero también a los procesos de asepsia y antisepsia, a la utilización en los países donde se puede de las charolas desechables, estériles, de los equipos para proporcionar la anestesia. Let me see, I'm going to hand over the mic to Paul. I'm going to hand over the mic to Paul Barrage.
Andre, can you hear me?
I translated the text in Dutch into English so that you can read it as well. Perhaps that gives you a good idea of how meningitis in the Netherlands was tackled some 25-30 years ago.
Andre, can you hear me?
I can hear you, yeah.
Great. Fantastic talk. Thank you for that. Just to bring it into context, so 4 hospitals, private hospitals, 1,800 regional anesthetics, 79 patients developed either mycotic meningitis or aseptic meningitis. So now this is kind of an epicenter of maybe the largest and most significant outbreak of its kind, perhaps in the history of regional anesthesia. Is that a fair statement?
That's a correct statement. I really looked up all meningitis cases, well, not all meningitis, but the publications related to meningitis, and I could not find really a series of meningitis. So the one in the Netherlands was until now, I think, the largest. And so you have now 79 patients. There must be something, and that is in the line with Dennis Jones' lecture. Please go systematically. Look at the patient factors, the local anesthetics, the technique that you are using, the anesthetist, how they are working, preparing their sets, etc. So there's a whole lot of things that needs to be elucidated. I wish you good luck with finding the cause, because there must be a common factor, a common denominator in this particular. You cannot have 79 infections in such a short time. What was the time frame?
Between May, 5 months.
5 months. Then this is not a coincidence. There must be somewhere a significant factor. And
Andre, in all the cases that you...
How many anesthetists involved? I mean, it's important. 1,800 regional anesthetics. I'm sure there are many anesthetists involved.
There are, probably 10 to 12.
Yeah.
Andre, in the literature that you've reviewed, and you've probably done more regional anesthesia than any person alive these days, how many of those meningitis cases were due to a fungus, any type of fungus?
explain that.
Well, one of the working hypotheses is...
The ones I've seen were bacterial ones, but not fungus.
Yeah, please. This is going to translate it. Hold on.
Le pregunta el doctor Velázquez cuántas, que a través de los años, que probablemente él sea el médico que más anestesias regionales en obstétricas ha hecho, que esté vivo actualmente en el mundo, o que haya supervisado, que haya publicado, y es el que a lo mejor más literatura ha propuesto, ha hecho y ha leído, que cuántas meningitis por hongo ha visto en el mundo. Dice que es tan poca la literatura que él ha encontrado que ni siquiera puede recordar una cifra, que las meningitis con el que se ha topado y que ha visto que tengan alguna significancia mínima estadística son bacterianas o asépticas. Le pregunta al doctor que qué pueden hacer cuál creen sean los pasos para poder llegar a una conclusión, y dice: uno, revisar las técnicas que se están utilizando y revisar todo lo que ya Durango adecuadamente está haciendo, buscando los agentes, ver de dónde provienen.
One of the prevailing hypotheses is that the reason why there was a latency of several weeks to months is because a mycotic infection it was infected with a spore, and it took between 8 to 12 weeks for that to translate into a central spinal infection, particularly the posterior fossa. Have you had any experience with that type of mechanistic model? So sorry about this technical issues. One of the suggestions is because there was a latency between the time of the spinal or epidural until symptoms appeared, mild symptoms within a few days, severe symptoms on average, I think, between 8 to 12 weeks, and sometimes even 16 weeks, including serious ones leading to mycotic aneurysms, subarachnoid hemorrhages, and death. The mechanism suggested, and I want to sort of think out loud with us here, is that the sporulation of this mycotic organism took multiple months until these spores essentially translated into a live infection. Any thoughts about that hypothesis?
It's difficult, and I'm really happy to think with you. My experience in obstetrics, I've done at least 5,000 epidurals, and I don't know how many spinals in my life, but many. But I've not seen this problem. Even in the pain clinic, I've had patients with one single catheter for more than 2 years, and the patient died with the catheter without any infection. So I don't know, but I've seen also patients who developed an abscess, an epidural abscess with a catheter. So it is very difficult for me, but there's no really fundamental denominator in these ones. The number of cases that I've seen, although I've done 10,000 of recent blocks, I've not seen enough infections to give a reasonable answer to this.
Hold on, we're just going to translate that. Hold on, Andrew.
Una pregunta muy interesante. Le pregunta el doctor Paul que del mecanismo. Él le dice que una de las teorías, o la teoría de aquí que se tienen los científicos de Durango, es ¿por qué tardaron los pacientes entre 6, 12 hasta 18 semanas en desarrollar la forma grave de la enfermedad, los síntomas graves? Empezaron con síntomas leves y luego, semanas después, muchas de ellas empezaron con los síntomas fuertes. ¿Cuál sería el mecanismo? El mecanismo era propuesto, es que se inyectaron las esporas y las esporas pues tardan tiempo en desarrollar hasta que la infección o la enfermedad real se manifiesta. Le dice que en su experiencia, que si él está de acuerdo con esto. Dice que él ha puesto, de lo que tiene registrado, más de 5,000 epidurales y muchos más subdurales. Y que en esos tiempos, y que ha puesto catéteres que han durado hasta 2 años, los catéteres en la espalda, y no desarrollan 2 años, y no desarrollan infección, pero que también tiene pacientes que hacen abscesos a los días, pero son tan pocos que no los han analizado, que no son muestras suficientes para análisis, no más que para casos, y que en todos los casos que los han analizado, single case reports, todos los casos de reportes de un solo caso por algún problema de infección han sido bacterianas o asépticas, no de hongos.
Andre, I think we're almost ready to wrap up. Any final thoughts for the community here about approaching this fact-finding investigation on how to protect patients and how to avoid these peridural, epidural infections?
If you're asking me a question, I can't hear you.
We're ready to wrap up, Andre. Can you hear me?
Now I can hear you. Yeah.
Excellent. Any final thoughts that you want to share as we continue with these early steps of this fact-finding trip about how best to think about addressing this calamitous event with these 31 dead patients and 79 infected thus far?
And what is the question?
Any final words of wisdom?
Well, this is a significant event, and it's a very bad one. But it's the same as Dennis Jones told us. We need the information. We need to dig deep and go and find the reasons, the sequence of the events, and the reasons why it happens, and provide recommendations to prevent these things from happening again. That is so important. It is important that you are doing this investigation very carefully. I'm willing to help wherever I can with my knowledge. Look, I produced some 100, out of my 500 publications, I produced some 150 on obstetric epidurals and spinals, and 150 on regional anesthesia on top of that. And I'm really willing to help. This is so an important issue, but we need to stop it. We need to make sure that we know what are the causes, provide recommendations, and safety issues. That is important. Think about the future of our patients, and as I said, there were 600,000 deaths in obstetrics 10 years ago. Now it's half of them, 300,000. That's still 300,000 too many. And the 31 deaths in Mexico, we need to honor them by investigating this in a very thorough way and come out with solutions. That's a promise you have to make to these women who die.
Very powerful thinking and words. Thank you. Very, very powerful thinking, very powerful words. I'm going to translate. Le pregunta que cuáles serían sus recomendaciones, lo que piensa él sobre lo que está sucediendo en Durango. Dice que él tiene más de 500 publicaciones relacionadas a los bloqueos regionales para obstetricia. Y en todas sus publicaciones nunca se había encontrado con algo semejante ni en todo lo que él había leído. Que lo que dijo el señor Dennis Jones, de cómo llevar a cabo la investigación y cómo hacerlo de manera cuidadosa, con gente capacitada, con personas, con formar equipos y realmente investigar, es un deber de la Federación Mexicana de Colegios de Anestesiología, porque somos el órgano que debe de llevar a cabo esta investigación para tratar de prevenir. Que felicita a la gente que ya está en esto, pero que debemos de hacer una promesa. Fíjense que se me hizo muy poderoso esto que dijo. Se debe hacer una promesa en honor a las mujeres que murieron, a esas 31 mujeres que ya fallecieron, de que se va a investigar minuciosamente, de manera científica, de manera, como dijo el señor Jones, de manera estructurada, con protocolos, para poder encontrar qué fue lo que pasó y que no vuelva a suceder. Creo que se me hicieron muy poderosas, me llenó eso, me llegó eso de hacer una promesa en honor de esas 31 mujeres, de que vamos a llegar para sacar las recomendaciones para que no vuelva a suceder. ¿Alguna pregunta de alguien?
¿Podríamos saber cuál fue la cantidad, o si él tiene alguna idea de qué cantidad se tuvo que haber inoculado para causar este daño?
Yes, they want to know that in your experience, do you have any idea of what the quantity of the sporums that should have been injected in the dural space to subdural space to produce meningitis?
Local anesthetics should be free of any additives. Yeah. The manufacturing industry, I think AstraZeneca and perhaps other companies produce these local anesthetics. They know very well that they have to produce sulfites-free local anesthetics. But also, if you have carefully looked at one of my slides, I've shown you the ampoules of the local anesthetics of bupivacaine. And even it's mentioned on the ampoule, you can use this for a regional block, but for instance for peripheral nerve blocks, but not for spinals or not for epidurals. It is indicated. Please read carefully these ampoules. Sometimes we tend just to read what we want to read, and that is, okay, this is bupivacaine 0.5%, and that's it. But read carefully, it's also dependent, and we need the knowledge of these manufacturing industry. And perhaps people from Harvard wrote about this a long time ago. It was Covino who wrote quite a number of these articles on pharmacology, that you really have to pay attention to what exactly is injected into the epidural and subarachnoid spaces. Bisulfite for sure is causing troubles, so don't use that. But there are also other additives that should not be used, and usually it's to make the local anesthetic stable. If you're adding on additives, like for instance adrenaline or even sedative, the manufacturing industry has to add on other additives, and that's maybe harmful for the patient's cells, I mean, in the epidural and in the subarachnoid space.
Thank you, I'll translate. Thank you, I'll translate. Dice que la cantidad, pues no, ¿verdad? La cantidad no, porque pues no han tenido los casos para poderlos analizar. Que lo que sí dice es que debemos de tener mucho cuidado cuando la sustancia que estamos utilizando para poner nuestros bloqueos tienen indicaciones específicas de que no se usen en el espacio subdural, porque esas sustancias contienen aditivos que pueden coadyuvar para que se desarrollen ciertos organismos, que no debemos de usar los bisulfatos que tienen los anestésicos locales, y sobre todo cuando agregamos coadyuvantes. No sabemos si cuando agregamos inclusive los coadyuvantes que son sedativos en el espacio subdural, peridural, que nosotros lo hemos utilizado como, eso no lo dijo él, que lo usamos para meter hasta todo, él mismo dice hasta ketamina. Cuando usamos eso, estamos agregando también productos que son estabilizadores de los medicamentos que no han sido autorizados para eso. Entonces, que debemos de tener mucho cuidado, porque hay X cantidad de anestésicos locales que son recomendados para bloqueos regionales periféricos, pero no para el sistema nervioso central. Entonces, tener cuidado con lo que ponemos, saber qué estamos poniendo y exigirle a las compañías que los hacen, AstraZeneca o quien sea, que nos digan qué es lo que contienen como preservativos los preservadores, los medicamentos.
Andre, thank you for a phenomenal introduction on something you've devoted 30, 35 years to. I think as we move forward under the president of the Federation Society of Anesthesia, we're going to set up a group that Gerardo is going to lead, and you will actively be part of that. So thank you so much for your willingness to be part of that and for contributing to today's wonderful talk. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I wish you and all your colleagues in Mexico every success with this safety investigation. I'm going to help wherever I can, because we need to prevent mishaps and these serious complications of morbidity in women from happening in the future. I wish you every success with further this meeting and conference. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Agradece él mucho la invitación que se le hizo para participar en esto, que está súper interesado, que han disminuido las muertes de 600,000 que había hace 15 años a 300,000 muertes maternas durante la anestesia, y que eso es un paso muy adelantado, pero aún hay 300,000 muertes en el mundo por muertes maternas relacionadas o en el que se participan también la anestesia. Y que este problema lo preocupa muchísimo porque es algo único en el mundo, nunca visto, que se debe de aprender de él, y que si él puede participar en alguna recomendación por la experiencia que él tiene en los bloqueos tanto peridurales como subdurales, estaría contento de ayudar, y que felicita a la Federación por estar haciendo el esfuerzo. Muchas gracias, thank you very much. Un aplauso, por favor.
You have received the thank you from the public and applauses from from us. Thank you very much, and we will be in contact with you, Andre. Thank you.
Recording stopped.